I'm a choir boy in love with a goth. Hey, watch it, bozo, he said as I bumped into him. I'm so sorry, I said timidly and watched him angrily walk on. He was Aiden, my neighbor, who moved in 2 months ago into the neighborhood. The bump was the first contact and conversation we had ever had. I knew his name. His parents screamed it whenever he played loud music with his band in their garage. Our lives were stark opposites, two sides of a magnet in the way our lives were. He was a goth and I was a choir boy. He had cool parents according to what I saw and heard. I mean, they tolerated his loud music. I had very religious parents, a strict, emotionally abusive father, and a loving, long-suffering mother. Even with the difference between us, I had a crush on him. I was always watching him through the window, wishing he could speak to me or something. We had passed by each other a couple of times, but he never noticed me like I was some grasshopper and he was a baobab tree. I had never made a move to speak because I was a shy, lanky boy in senior year and he was a goth, dark, gap-year student. But my attraction toward him increased day by day. One day we were having choir practice at church when my eye sighted a figure standing outside the church. I could barely see his face, but I continued singing. Soon I saw the figure near the entrance and stared at us. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could tell he was drawn by the music spilling from the church into the street. Just at that moment when I turned my gaze to the choir master and returned it to the figure, he had gone. As I stepped outside the church after the practice, I stopped in my tracks as I saw the person in front of me. I was surprised to see Aiden. He was smiling at me as I walked down the stairs. I had to turn behind me to see if he was really smiling at me. "Hey bro," he said. You are talking to me?" I asked. "Yeah. What's your name?" Lucas," I stuttered. "Oh, Lucas. The name is Aiden," he replied. "Boy, you've got some crazy pipes. I heard your voice as I passed, and I had to just stop and listen." "Oh, thank you." There was this internal joy that I had to suppress, but it appeared on my face as blushes. "I thought like an angel descended in your midst and was singing. I didn't know it was you, neighbor." "I'm not so good." "What? You're kidding, right?" "You'd better be," he said. "Take it from singer to singer. Saying your voice is angelic is not a compliment you just take out of your ass. You gotta work it. I'm not even halfway near you." "Thank you. You've got a great voice, by the way. I hear you when you play." "Oh, thanks, man. I try," he said, then smiled timidly. "Okay, Lucas, see you around." "All right, bye," I waved to him as he walked on. The smile on me did not leave as I stared at him till he became tiny in the distance. Finally, my crush had noticed me. My day was made. The next week. Ever since that day, Aiden started greeting me. He was always calling me Lucifer. I understood that he called me that because the devil was once the angel of music, but I always prayed my father wouldn't hear him one day. My father had already given me a strict warning the day he packed in to never relate with him. My father called him a child of the devil because he was a goth. One Saturday, Aiden had begun to disturb the neighborhood with his band. What was noise to everyone was music to my ears. My father was fuming as he struggled to read past a page on a newspaper. I watched from the window while I heard my father speaking under his breath. "This devil child has brought his music again from the pit of hell," my father said. "Hank, stop calling him a devil's child," my mother replied. "A devil's child is what he is, a delinquent who summons the demons with his instrument." "He's just playing music, Dad," I said. "What do you know? You're just a kid. He's not playing music, he is summoning the demons," he replied. "I don't want to see him with you, or he's going to transfer some of his demons into you. He's darkness, and you're light." It was already annoying to know he was my father. It was more annoying to know he had a voice and could speak. Whenever he opened his mouth, it was as annoying as the sound of nails on a chalkboard. You just know the words he was going to speak were garbage, but I dared not face him because I was scared of him. "Where are you going?" he asked my mother. "I'm going to the grocery store." "Dressed that way?" What my mother was wearing was a pair of jeans and a regular blouse. Nothing special to them, but my father saw it as indecent for some reason. "Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it." "Me neither," I said. "Shut up, boy. Mom and Dad are talking. Go to your room now." I wanted to be a little defiant, but I realized I didn't have the balls to do it. I reluctantly stood to my feet and slowly walked away. As I climbed the stairs, I could still hear his voice. "Hank." "Mary, I've always told you not to wear these indecent dresses." But they're not bad. What? How are you so blind to see you are dressed like a slut? He asked. I clenched my fist so tight as I boiled inside. I don't like that word, Hank. You caused it. I couldn't wait to hear the rest. I angrily walked up the stairs to my bedroom. I covered my ears with my pillow as their voice increased. 3 days later, I was walking home from school one day when I heard the sound of a guitar echoing from a distance. I knew where it was coming from. It was nowhere but Aiden's garage. I got closer and saw him playing his electric guitar, acting like he was in front of a crowd. He saw me and nodded as a greeting while I gave him a quick wave. I wanted to turn to go to my house, but the music was too sweet to resist. For someone whose music was strictly censored by his dad, what I was hearing was strange and at the same time beautiful. I stood there, listening, till I got carried away. Lucas! I heard my name suddenly and turned sharply in the direction. It was my mother. I turned and walked away from there toward the house. I wasn't in so much trouble since it was my mother. I was glad it wasn't my father. As I soon entered, she asked, "What do you think you're doing?" I wasn't speaking to him. I was just listening to the music. Were you so quick to forget what your father told you? She asked. You know that all that is shit. Lucas! She yelled in shock. Swear words were a grave sin in my household. I'm sorry, Mom. Go to your room and ask God for forgiveness because I know you didn't learn that from me or your father, she said. It must be the influence of that boy. No, that's ridiculous. I wasn't planning to tell your father about all this, but I changed my mind, she said. Sometimes I don't know why you enable him. That's why he's a jerk. Lucas! Before she could talk further, I left her. Like she said she was going to, she told him. He was so furious as expected, he told me never to ever go near him. I told him I was going to do as he commanded, but I knew I was going to do the exact opposite. A week after. It was another day and I could hear Aiden's music from the distance. As soon as I got closer, I saw that he was playing with his band. As soon as he saw me, he called, Lucifer Morningstar. It's Lucas. It rhymes with Lucas, he said. Then he turned to the others. This is the guy I've been talking about, the one with the angelic voice. I smiled. They greeted me with a nod and I greeted them back in the same manner. Want to join us? He asked. I turned to look at my house and returned my attention to him. No, I think I'll pass. Sorry. Why? Nothing, I said, and he didn't push further. I walked to the house and I could already see the look on my mother's face. I didn't let her say anything. At night, I thought she was going to report me, but she didn't. Perhaps what I said about enabling pierced her thick skin, or because my father told her food didn't taste good that night. 2 weeks later. Over the next couple of weeks, I always went to Aiden's place to listen to him play. Each time I spent there listening to his music was longer than the next time. Seems you are getting the like rock music, he said. Yeah. You know the vibe. Let me introduce you to some of my favorites, he said. You have to follow me up to my room. I'm not sure I want to. Why? I'm not gonna kill you. Just want to show you my vinyl records. I know, it's just that my dad, he doesn't want to see me with you, I said. Why? You don't want to know what he thinks of you. He's a very religious, superstitious man, so you can assume what he thinks of you as a goth who plays rock music. Oh, he said and chuckled. I guess I am what Lucifer became, the devil. You should always avoid me or else I'm gonna offer you as a sacrifice. I'm not like my dad. I think you're cool and I like your music, I said in a small voice. You probably shouldn't disobey your dad. I want to. Let's go to your room, I said. My parents are not around at the moment. You sure? He asked. I replied to him with a nod. Then I followed him up to his room. His room was as dark as the clothes he wore. No light. Welcome to my altar, he said and laughed. I chuckled nervously. I wanted to rebel against my dad, but the fear of him finding out that I was going against his commands kind of scared me. He could do something I wouldn't like. Why do you like vinyl records? A couple of reasons. First, I like that crackle sound when the needle drops. Gives me this feeling of electricity, because that's what rock makes you feel. Electric. I also like the artworks and the fact that they are forms of collectibles. I love vintage things too. That's cool. Let me demonstrate, he said as he looked through his library of vinyls before he picked one. Then he pulled out the record and placed it on the record player. As soon as we heard the crackle, he looked at me and we smiled. Then the music began to play. I smiled and watched as he banged his head and pretended like he was doing a guitar solo. That was my introduction to rock music, and I loved it. the next 2 weeks. Since that day, Aiden introduced me to rock music, and I started listening to it. My playlist changed, but I dared not play it when my father was around. I started to sneak into Aiden's place each time my parents made noise with their arguments. Aiden's home became my place of escape, and slowly, I became like Aiden the more we got closer. One night when I sneaked out of the house, Aiden told me he wanted to show me something. "We're going somewhere," he said. "Let's go to the garage." "Where are we going?" "You'll see." We went down to his garage and I saw him go towards something covered with a tarp. He pulled the tarp and it revealed a motorcycle. I stared at the thing in awe. Then he climbed the bike and said, "Hop in." "Wait, where are we going?" "Somewhere I can't reveal yet," he smiled mischievously. I'm not sure I want to get on this bike," I said. "Why? You're scared?" "Not that. My father must not find out that I sneaked out. He will be more mad when he finds out that I got on a bike with you." "You are so caged and in bondage, man," he said. "That's why I want to take you on this ride, to show you what freedom feels like." "I'm not sure." "Make up your mind, Lucy," he said. "Embrace freedom or continue living in bondage." "Don't put it that way," I said and chuckled. I thought about it as I stared at the body of the bike. I never had the experience of being on one before. How exhilarating it would be to, spread your wings in the air while your hair repels and swims like you see in the movies. Freedom. "Let's go," I said, "but let's not take too long." "Your wish is my command, sir. Hop on." He helped me hop on the bike. The bike vibrated violently beneath me when he started the bike, causing me to be scared. Then he rode out of the garage. As the air rushed against our faces, I was scared that it might push me off the bike, so I immediately wrapped my arms around his belly like a seatbelt. While I saw my house grow tiny in the distance, I was really doing it. My head could not stay long in the gushing air because it was entering everywhere. My nose and mouth. There was enough air, but I couldn't breathe. It was like I was being suffocated with air. I had to drop my head and place it on Aiden's back. Eventually, Aiden began to slow down at a point. It was at that time I could raise my head and see we were somewhere in the middle of the city. We climbed down from the bike. He held my hand as he led the way. You have no idea of the joy that burst in me. "I'm about to do something here," he said. It was at that moment I realized that we were in front of a tattoo shop. It was written in neon light. "You're getting a tattoo?" I asked. "We are." "What?" I exclaimed and pulled my hand from his grip. "Relax, I'm kidding," he said, laughing. "What are you scared of, the needle?" "Not just that. What if I go too far with this freedom and fly close to the sun and then fall?" "You only fall if your wings are made of wax, Lucas," he said. "Hmm. You know, I didn't know what to tattoo on my body, but I guess I know what I want now." "What?" I asked. "Freedom? Wings? Wax?" "You've got jokes, Lucas," he replied, and I chuckled. We walked into the tattoo shop, and I was spooked by the serious eyes that followed me. It was like they stared to distract them from the pain. When it was Aiden's turn, he smiled and said, "I'm nervous." "Why?" "It's my first tattoo," he admitted. "Do you want to do it?" "Yes," he said, "but I'm nervous. I'm scared of the pain." "I guess that's the price of freedom, isn't it?" "Yeah," he said. I I would want to hold you, to distract me from the pain at least." "No problem," I replied. I then smiled. He wanted it on his back because he didn't want his parents to see it yet. "What do you want to be written on your back?" "Icarus," he said, and gave me a knowing smile. I smiled as I realized it was based on what we talked about earlier, about flying close to the sun with wax wings, just like Icarus did. He held my hand as the tattoo artist cleaned his skin with antiseptic. He closed his eyes when he saw the artist pick the tattoo gun. He screamed as soon as the needle touched his skin. Even I, who was to distract him from his pain, yelled like a chicken. At the end of the night, he got his tattoo. His face was red from yelling and screaming. He had intended to have a big or medium-sized tattoo, but seeing that he was going to faint from his yelling, the tattoo artist did a small one near his buttocks. He still yelled. The next 2 days. "How's your back?" I asked him after I had returned from school one day. He was tuning his guitar when I saw him. "I feel good. I just put an ice pack on it," he said. "By the way, I'm going to the cinema today. Want to come?" "I've never been to a cinema before. I would like to go, but I feel my dad will soon discover that I always sneak out of the house." "What is he going to do about it?" he inquired. "He's gonna ground me and give me some other punishment." "What's the difference between being grounded and what you've been experiencing?" You've been grounded all your life, he said. Imagine you saying you have never been to a cinema before. My father is strict about the movies I watch. He believes that it would corrupt us. Damn, he controls everything in your life. You're a prisoner in your father's prison. Sorry to say, he said. We're gonna break you out. Who's we? You and I are gonna break you the hell out, he said. The movie's at 4. You gonna come? All right. Truly, I followed Aiden to the cinema, and we found a place to sit. He said, Heads up, it's a horror movie. What? I exclaimed. If he had told me it was horror, I probably wouldn't have come. I had never watched one, but I knew what fear meant. Shh, the movie's starting, he said. Then I saw him pull out a can of beer from beneath his clothes. He looked at me and smiled. Throughout the movie, I was either closing my eyes or yelling. At a point, I had to hold his arm and cower in his chest. I just wanted the whole thing to end at a point. I don't want to ever do that again, I said. Why? He asked, laughing. It's obvious, I almost wet my pants. Why didn't you tell me it was a horror movie? I did, he said, feigning fake surrender. You told me before the movie started. It was your choice to come, he replied. If you had told me beforehand, I wouldn't have, I said. Why the hell do they make horror movies anyways? It's the same reason they created roller coasters and drop towers, he replied. You just gotta face your fears. Wait a minute. Did I hear right when I heard you swear, choir boy? He asked, chuckling. You said hell. I guess someone is a bad influence on me. Definitely not me, he said. I wouldn't want your father to come for my head. I'm gonna tell him myself. He wouldn't dare, he replied and laughed. Want to try beer? I don't know if I would like the taste, but it wouldn't hurt to try. It wouldn't, he said, and pulled out a can of beer from where he brought out the former one. How many do you have in there? This is the last. He opened it and I drank it. I spat out the first gulp. He told me to take a few more, saying I would get used to the taste. Eventually, I did get used to it. I didn't know if it was the beer or something, but Aiden started confessing. I'm scared I might not get admitted into college, he said. Why? I'm just scared. My parents don't say it, but I think they're disappointed in me. Why do you think that? It's a normal thing for parents of goth kids who are in a band. What if they aren't disappointed in you, but you're the one projecting? I asked. How do you mean? He asked and looked at me. Maybe you just doing all this to be, seen. You don't know what you're saying, Lucas. Yeah, I'm saying I don't know what I'm saying either, I said and chuckled. I think I'm drunk. Oh God, he said, and we laughed. The laughter faded, but our gaze on each other did not cease. Every muscle in our face didn't move, nor did our eyes. Time must have paused too. Everything had clicked off like a switch, no sound or noise in the background. We were now in our own world. Something nudged me on the inside that made me fall my face toward his and kiss him for passing minutes before I detached my lips. I could see his shocked eyes darting about my face, wondering what happened. I stuttered. Aiden, this is not the beer speaking. I've always had a huge crush on you for the longest time before we became friends, but the crush I have on you has grown into something else. He still had that look and was still lost for words. I was getting ashamed of myself when I felt his gentle hand on my face, which pulled toward him. Before I could know what was going on, he trapped my breath with his lips. We were in that moment in our own world until a noise disrupted the moment. It was my phone ringing. I pulled out my phone and saw that it was a call from my dad. Oh my God, I'm dead. I'm in so much trouble, I said. It's my dad. Oh shit, he said. He's gonna kill me, I said worriedly. A week later. You might wonder how I was able to get through that night. Well, I did something I had never done. Lie to my father. I was so worried and didn't know what to do. It was like I had my heart in my mouth as I thought of how I was gonna face him. He's gonna kill me, I told Aiden. No, he won't. You can tell him a lie. Tell him you went for a prayer walk or something like that. Don't worry, you'll be fine as long as you can maintain a straight face. I did exactly as Aiden had prescribed, and it worked like magic. My father was the proudest father in the world that night. As for me, I slept well that night after replaying the scene of the kiss in my head. From there, Aiden and I became something more. My father had told me not to befriend him, but he didn't know I had become more than friends to him. To me, I was still his shy choir boy son, but he didn't know I had grown wings. Lucas, get dressed. Rick is sick and we gotta take him to the vet, my father said. I'm sorry, Dad, I don't think I can go. I didn't sleep well last night because I was studying. You've become something else, boy, he said. You've grown. I like it. Hank, you should tell him to stop staying up late in the night. He needs to sleep well, my mom said. What's bad in burning the midnight candle? Let him be. But... Let him be, Mary. Let's go, he said. Watch your baby brother. All right. I'm proud of you, son. Then both of them walked out and left. I called Aiden some minutes later. Hey, I said. Hey, he replied. There was glee in his voice. Come over to my house. My parents just left me with my brother. You want us to babysit him? No, he's sleeping. We can do whatever we like, I said. Whatever we like? That's hot, he said, and I chuckled. I'll be there in a few minutes. Some minutes later, he rang the doorbell. I had barely opened the door when he grabbed my face and began kissing me. Even though he held my face, I couldn't and wouldn't pull my face away. Our lips were glued to each other as we walked the stairs to my room. As soon as we got into the room, I pushed him onto the bed. I gazed at him while I pulled off my shirt. Then I climbed the bed and crawled up to his face. Ooh la la, he said. Where did you learn this one, choir boy? Shut up and kiss me. Okay, he chuckled and joined his lips with mine. I moaned and groaned while outbursts of air pushed through our nostrils and punched at our faces. It was the passion. Suddenly, the door flung open behind us, and what came out through the door was my father's angry voice. Immediately, I heard it. I pulled myself off to see my father's stupefied and dumbfounded face. His face was many things at once, different reactions causing his facial muscles to twitch. He was angry, at the same time sad. He was disappointed, shocked, flabbergasted. Dad, this isn't what it looks like, I said as I scrambled for my bedsheets to cover myself, panicking and embarrassed. It's exactly what it looks like, Aiden said. Aiden! Lucas, my father muttered and then pointed at Aiden. What is this devil's child doing in bed with you? His voice was shaky and he looked like he was so close to tears. Bumpin' uglies, Aiden replied. Stop it, Aiden, I said. I turned to my father and couldn't say a thing. I couldn't even look into his eyes. Dad, I'm sorry. You're sorry? You're sorry? Sir, Aiden was speaking, but my father stopped. Get out of here this minute, my father roared. Aiden glared at him and said nothing. He didn't move a muscle. Aiden, please go, I said. I don't want to leave you with him. Don't worry, I'll be fine, I replied. He nodded and stood to his feet. He had a glare on my father's face as he walked out of the room. It was now just my father and me with the heavy tension in the air. He closed his eyes and clenched his fist. Dad, I can explain. What is there to explain other than that you're a disappointment? My father yelled. After I told you not to befriend that boy, you didn't just befriend him, you ended up in bed with him. You let him into your life and let some of his legion of demons find their way into you and you become gay. You become gay, Lucas. You became gay, he yelled. You have become everything unholy. You have wined and dined with the devil. Are you even my son? I wish I was not your son. I've always wished that. Sometimes I ask God why he put me in the household of a jerk for a father, I said. What did you call me? He asked angrily. You heard me. You should blame yourself and not me for giving birth to a gay son, I said. Don't you dare blame me for your mistake. That's what you are, a mistake. You're a regret, a trauma, a blackhead on a beautiful skin, a dent in our lives, a thing of misery, a bad father, an abuser. You are everything I hate. I hate you, Dad. I hate you. I yelled, and in the blink of an eye, he slapped those words out of my mouth. Don't even think of calling me Dad or Father, he said. As from now on, you are not my son. What? Yes. It was at that moment my mother walked in with a befuddled look. What's going on? She asked. I saw that boy come out of the house. What happened? God made me forget my wallet and made us turn back to see the evil this boy was doing behind us, he said. What did he do? Think of the worst thing they could have been doing together alone, he said. My mother stared at him in horror and couldn't speak. I'm leaving to take Rick, who is better than you, to the vet. By the time I come back, I don't want to see you again in this house. What? Dad! I'm not your dad, boy. I don't want to see you when I'm back, or I'm going to call the cops, he said. Dad, why are you doing this? Where's he going to go? He's our son, she said, crying. He is 18 years old. He's already an adult, he said. And he's not my son. Matt is my only son, he said, and then he left. Hank, my mother said, her voice trailing off into soft sobs. I had begun to cry too. Mom, please do something. Where does he want me to go? Lucas, why? She asked. Her voice was reaching high notes because she was crying. It's not my fault that I love him, I replied. She couldn't say any more words. She just stared with teary eyes and walked away. Mom! Mom! I called, but she didn't listen. I fell to my knees crying and holding my head as though I was protecting my head as my world crashed down. Aiden came up to my room after some minutes and met me in my devastated position. What's going on, Lucas? He disowned me, I said in a weak voice. The tears had dried and left a trail map on my cheeks. What? He exclaimed, shocked. He told me to leave his house. What kind of father does that to his son because of what he did? He asked. It's so stupid. Where am I going to go, Aiden? I asked. Come with me to my house, he stated as if obvious. What would your parents say? I asked worriedly. They'll take you in, don't worry, he replied. Please stop crying, let's pack your things. 3 days later. I had moved into Aiden's home before they came back. At first, Aiden's parents were mad at him when he explained what happened, but they accepted me and that's how I started living there. I was always staring at my former home through the window. Sometimes I found my mom standing outside staring at me before my dad would bring her in. One morning, I saw my mom walking toward Aiden's house while my father yelled behind her, telling her to come back. My mother didn't listen. I ran downstairs to the door before she could ring the doorbell a second time. As soon as I opened the door, she quickly wore a smile and stretched her embrace toward me. I went to her and hugged her. I saw my father staring back in anger before he went back inside. How are you? She asked. Her voice had become hoarse from crying and her eyes were red. I'm good. What about you? I'm obviously not good, she said. My son is not living with us. It's not my fault, I replied harsher than I intended. How are they treating you? Great. I would choose these 3 days I have been with them than an entire life with him, I said. Lucas, he's still your father. You heard him. He's not my father. Then there was silence. What can I do to bring you back? I sighed and disappointedly told her. I don't think there's anything you can do. Your father and I have been arguing a lot lately. He says it is my fault you turned this way, she said. It's not your fault. He always makes everything your fault. If it's going to be anyone's fault, it's his. I came out of him and I was born gay, I said. I love you, Mom, but I can't come back to the home of an abusive man. He made it easy for me to be free from him. You should also try it. Lucas, she started, but I cut her off. Mom, he doesn't love you. He does and says all sorts of things to you that are toxic to you or anyone around him. Stop taking it in and suffering. Leave like I did. But I don't want to leave him because of you and your brother. You're hearing it from me. We don't want him anymore, I said. Matt can't make words yet to express himself, but you can tell that he hates Dad. He never lets him carry or touch him. She stared at me and nodded. I will think about it. A week later, my parents divorced. You can imagine how glad I was. My mother was the major provider in the family, so she bought my father's share of the house. What it meant was that my father was out of our lives. We can now be happy as a family of 4, minus 1. It meant that I could now be with Aiden without looking over my shoulder because my mother gradually supported our relationship. Finally, I could be myself without anyone controlling me. I can now feel what it meant to be free. Aiden and I continued our happy relationship, and it was going great. Behind his gothic appearance, he was a cutie patootie. He had a way of melting me with his words. He even wrote a couple of songs about me. So, this is what love feels like. I always found myself asking that question. He was all I thought of, and sometimes I stupidly thought, because love makes you do stupid things, that he was my purpose. 2 months later, he got admitted to college and he was not happy to tell me. Why are you not happy about it? Well, 1, school sucks, and 2, it means I'd be away from you, he said. It doesn't matter, I can do a long-distance relationship. We will always be in touch, I said. Besides, I applied to your school. Really? He asked with glee. Yeah. He hugged me as soon as I replied. I'm only worried I might not get in. Why wouldn't you? You're at the top of your class. They're definitely looking for people like you. I hope so. I know so, he said, and we kissed. And I always melted into it. Conclusion. Well, that was what happened. I got in after I graduated high school. Aiden was the first person I told before anyone else. You need to see how he screamed when I told him on the phone. We continued our relationship in college, and I must tell you, it has been beautiful with Aiden. When I think back to the time I had a crush on him and only watched him from my window, I never thought anything could happen between us like every other crush that has come and gone. But Cupid shot the arrow at him too, and the rest, as they say, is history. Trust me, love is the most beautiful thing when it finds you. The end. Have you ever felt what it means to be in search of freedom? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force. And stay wholesome.